We are live. I'd like to welcome everyone to another episode of Heart to Heart with Bree. Tonight's guest is my friend Stephanie. Stephanie, would you please introduce yourself to the viewers?
Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Bree, for inviting me again on your program.
Thank
I am
you.
I am Stephanie Lopez, and as I introduced myself before, my old friends know me as Lucille Stennett, and my new friends as Stephanie Lopez. And there's a story to that. You have to go back to Bree, one of Bree's programs, to hear what I had to say about that. Thank you, Bree, again, and
Oh,
good night,
thank you.
everyone.
I know you're very busy, so I definitely appreciate you coming back tonight. And
Thank
I would like to say to the viewers, feel free to comment. If you have any questions, we welcome your questions. And for the men, I'm hoping that you'll be a part of this conversation,
you.
because I think this is a very important conversation because as we were discussing earlier, Stephanie, this is a time when a lot of marriages start to go downhill because there's not enough understanding about this whole thing of menopause. So let's talk about the three stages of menopause: perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause.
So, perimenopause is described as the period before you get into menopause. So you
Yeah.
might be experiencing some symptoms. Your periodic periods not as frequent. You might even begin to have a little bit of hot flashes, all the symptoms that you may have um, after you go into menopause. So, menopause is when you experience 12 consecutive months without periods. Then you can say, I have experienced I'm in menopause.
Yes.
Um, and then postmenopause is, of course, a continuation of that. And it comes with a whole lot of symptoms.
Yes.
So,
Well,
yes.
I will say I went into perimenopause. I was around 40. Now, I didn't even know there was such a thing as perimenopause. I just knew of menopause at the
Mhm.
time.
Yes.
I can tell you that out of the blue, I started to feel really hot all the time, especially at night. I would be hot, then I would be cold. And then there was just a lot of things, and we'll be discussing it throughout the evening. But it hit me hard, and I tell you, it was it was brutal, especially when I didn't know what was happening to me. And I
Yes.
think there are a lot of women who go through that because when I heard the word menopause when I was younger, I was just thinking old women. When you're younger, you're arrogant, and that I was just thinking this is an old woman ailment. So at the age of 40, I was shocked to know that I was actually experiencing perimenopause. And
Yeah.
how I found out was I was reading a book one day, and it was like there was an um there was an ad for
Yeah.
a supplement, and it started describing all these symptoms
Hmm.
that I had. And I'll never forget, I put my head down on my desk and I started crying
Wow.
because I thought I was going into early stages of dementia, which is something that runs in my family because I was experiencing the brain fogginess, all that, which we'll talk
Hmm.
about. So, as they say, knowledge is power. Mikey, thank you so
It
much
is.
for tuning in. No, Mikey, please don't
Thank
sit
you.
it out. I said it earlier. I hope that the men will be a part of this conversation because I think if you're married or if you have a partner, that this can help you to better understand what your partner may be experiencing. So,
Exactly.
Mikey, please stay with us. So,
Yes.
Stephanie, when
Yes.
did you go through a rough
Well,
perimenopause period?
the good thing about it was that I have always said I didn't go through menopause, which is not true. I did not experience the hot flashes, and that's why I said that. But as soon
Okay.
as my husband passed away, um, nearly 20 years ago, I was in my 40s late for after, late 40s, call it that. And as soon as that happened, I went into full menopause. Whether I was having perimenopause before or not, I don't know, because it happened when he was sick, right? So he was diagnosed 2 years before, and maybe during that period, my period wasn't frequent, and I might have said it was something else, stress or so.
Yes.
So I think that kind of suppressed some of the feelings I would have noticed during that
Yes.
time. I think
Yes.
that's what happened. But thank God, the hot flashes and everything that my friends speak about, I never had.
Wow,
I
I
never
told you
had
you're
it.
blessed. You are blessed. You are so blessed. But let me ask you this. Do you think that
Mhm.
because when my son died, I
Yes.
remember for about 3 months I didn't have a period.
Hmm.
And I was wondering, was I going into menopause? But then it came back after about 3 months, and I realized maybe my body just went into shock because of the
Yes.
grief. So I think that could be a part of it too. So
Hmm.
I still, you just don't know how fortunate you are that you've not had a
Yes. I never had the hot flashes. I see my friend, I have a friend, they're fanning her from, oh, and I will come to that, why that happens and stuff. But I never
Yes.
had it. Thank God I
Oh my
never had
gosh,
it.
thank God for fans. I can't sleep without
Yeah.
mine. Well, let's go on to the next question now.
Yes.
This can be a time of stress and anxiety. So let's
Hmm.
address how menopause affects mental and emotional health due to hormonal changes. So
Hmm.
first, let's talk about irritability and mood swings.
Well, I think that what happens there is you have all that mood swing because your hormones are changing. You have less estrogen and
Yes.
your progesterone, everything, and your body begins to react to those changes.
Yes.
And what is happening, you can see physical changes in more
Yes.
advanced stages where your skin elasticity begins to change. You're more prone to some kinds of diseases, they say. You're more lackadaisical. All kinds of things happen. So those are some of the effects of hormonal changes.
Yes.
But also, they say you have, apart from the hot flashes, you have, as you said, night sweats.
Yes.
You may gain weight. You can't sleep, sleep disturbances. You may have your hair dropping out, hair loss, aches and pains. You don't want to have sex. You have decreased libido. You have, as you said, mental, you can't focus, mental health,
Yes.
you know. You have mood swings. You get very angry sometimes. Sometimes you can be depressed. All kinds of things that they attribute to this time of your
Yes.
life, of our
Yes,
lives.
yes. You know, there was an episode of Archie Bunker. I don't know if you've ever watched All in the Family, when
I just,
Edith was going through through menopause. That was
yes,
one of the funniest episodes. I would recommend that one to anyone. I
I
mean,
love to
that
watch it.
it was so well done, and especially
Yes.
I could really relate to it when I started going through the whole process.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
irritability, mood swings, hostility,
Yes.
anxiety, these are all things that we can experience. And I think sometimes it's, especially if you don't know what the heck is happening to you.
Yeah, I
That
think.
was my experience. I honestly, because I didn't think at the age of 40 that it was possible to be going through this menopause that I had read about for years. So,
Hmm.
next, let's talk about hot flashes. We'll go a little deeper. Insomnia and brain fog. Let's talk about those.
Yes. Okay. Now, as I said, I never had the hot flashes, or I should correct myself because I remember God allowed me to have one episode of that, and I said, "Oh God, if this is what hot flashes like, I don't want to have it." And I remember feeling as if I was burning up from the inside out.
Yes,
Is that it?
that's exactly how it feels.
And I said, oh my God, if this is it, I don't want to have it. I never experience it again. I never. So that's why I could say that I never had it. But God allowed me to feel that one time what it's all about.
It's very unpleasant. I know that for me, they would hit especially at night. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I got to the point where even if I turn my heat on, I still have to sleep with my fan. I
Oh.
have to have a fan. At night, I turn my AC down to 73, and
Mm-hmm.
I also have my ceiling fan. That way, I'm able to sleep comfortably. But a hot flash, it's like
Yes.
the best way to describe it, it feels as if your body is like an oven. This
Oh,
heat,
yes.
it's like this heat just comes out of nowhere, and it's such an uncomfortable feeling. I remember telling someone I wish I could have a thermostat on my body where I could adjust it, because it was so uncomfortable. And especially going to bed at night, it's like you have the covers on, then you start to sweat, you start to feel hot. You kick the
Mm-hmm.
covers off, and then you start to feel cold. And that's the ritual of the night, the hot and cold and hot and cold. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, it's really very, very unpleasant, which leads to insomnia. Now, I
Yes.
remember for years, and it was a very miserable time where I could not sleep. I was lucky if I got 3 hours of sleep each night. That
Yes.
was very unpleasant. Now, did you experience insomnia?
I never know. I,
Wow.
I can tell you no. If I experience anything, as I should say, it might have been during that period when I lost my husband, and
Yes.
I might have attributed all this effect to that loss.
Okay.
I didn't
Okay.
know the difference, but I don't recall ever not being able to sleep. If I go in bed, when I go to bed, I just put my head down and I am gone to La La Land.
Wow. Well, a lot of women that I have spoken to, hot flashes was one of the main things that they went through, and then
Mm-hmm.
insomnia. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell you, that insomnia, it's like where you're tossing and turning all night. You're tired, your body is begging for sleep. You put
Mm-hmm.
your head down, you toss and you turn, but you cannot fall
Fall
asleep.
asleep.
It's the worst feeling. And I remember going through that for
Yes.
years. And I'm telling you, I believe that's what attributes to the brain fogginess, because
Mm-hmm.
I was not able to think clearly. I
Yes.
remember reading a book, and I remember like, what the heck did I just read? And I remember reading that page about 20 times. And in my frustration, I put the book down because I was not absorbing the information. I'd like to welcome my friend Dorcia. Thank you so much for tuning in. But that was very, very unpleasant. And I think that's where a lot of women start to feel anxious,
Yes.
because they're wondering like, why can't I sleep? Why am I feeling so hot all the time? Why can't I think clearly? And you start to feel as if you're losing it. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
It's a fact. That is a fact. Not being able to concentrate. That part, maybe that part I have experienced because I there are times when your mind is not as focused as it should be. So I could
Yes.
say yes, you can. I've experienced that. Um, and I'm going right back to what we said earlier, that many people attribute menopause to just one thing, the hot flashes,
Yeah. But it's deeper than that.
but it's much deeper than that. But yes, I haven't really paid much. I think I've kept myself so busy going to the gym, doing things, exercising, reading, um, all these other things to keep my mind off of maybe those symptoms or those feelings that would be attributed to, menopause and postmenopause.
Well,
But
Stephanie, I
yeah.
worked out. I used to, and I'm, getting back into working out again. But I used to work out, I mean, religiously,
Mhm.
at least sometimes even a couple times a day. I gotten down to a size 2. It didn't make a difference. I had all my
Mhm.
symptoms. I mean, I was just one of those unfortunate women that really suffered
Yes.
through this process. And I know there are other women out there who are going through the same thing. And what I
Mhm.
would like to do is encourage these women because I think we don't talk about this enough. I think if
Absolutely.
there was more dialogue, women would have a better understanding of what they're
Mhm.
going through. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
It's true. We need to talk more about it. And as you said earlier, it's because I think the younger people, or maybe ourselves, if we look deep into ourselves, it might be because we attribute that to being old.
Yes.
And being old is like being useless. It's something, or being, or
Yes, it's
getting nearer to
true.
death. Going nearer to death is something that, even though it's a fact of life, we really don't want to even think about it sometimes. And
That
maybe
is true.
that is the reason why a lot of people don't talk more about it,
It's
I think.
true. It's true because as I told you earlier,
Hmm.
I would have never associated what I was going through with menopause or perimenopause. I didn't even know there was such a term at the time. But
Hmm.
I remember, as I told you earlier, I'm thinking this happens to old women, you know?
It's true. It's true. It's true. And so, even though some of us may be having those feelings, perimenopause feelings, we might say, oh, we're not in it. Or even when we're in menopause, some people may deny the fact that they're having there, because it means that you're going to have decreased libido, your sexual drive may be reduced, you know. A lot of things may happen to you, and you don't want to associate yourself
It's
with that.
it's true. Now, something I would like to place some emphasis on
Hmm.
is when you're in perimenopause, you're still able to get pregnant. Some
Hmm.
women, because their periods are not regular, you know, if those sometimes they just decide, well, you know what, I don't have to worry about getting pregnant. But there are women who have become pregnant during the perimenopausal stage.
Perimenopause, yes.
So please take that into please take note of that,
And
because that happens.
I often say too that these are the times when you have to be careful, because you may have children who are what you call it, syndrome. Here,
You're
this is
talking about
part of
Down syndrome.
menopause. This is part of the menopause.
Yeah.
Yes, but you might have what the syndrome. Those kids who are born with
You talking about
um,
Down syndrome?
Down syndrome kids.
Yeah.
Yes, you have those kids, and
Yeah, usually in later pregnancies, right? Later in life pregnancies.
later in life, yes, during the perimenopausal phase, I would say. Why? Because the estrogen is not as it should be. It's
Yeah.
reduced. You're beginning to see changes in your estrogen level, and that other um, estrogen and progesterone, levels.
Okay.
So your body reacts to that.
Yes. Yes. So I think, you know what, sometimes you see women and they have kids that are like in their 20s. Then all of a sudden they have these late life babies, as they call them. I think sometimes people do let their guards down during that time because they don't realize that they can still become pregnant during this stage, which will lead to my next question. We talked about hormonal changes and declining levels of estrogen and
Hmm.
how that can affect the libido. What advice do you have for women who no longer desire sex or intimacy?
Well, there are hormone replacement therapies that they can take, but those even come with some risk,
Yes.
and the risk could be cancer, in the breast or other areas of the bodies. But it also means that you can have those women can have increased sex drive.
Yes.
The symptoms are different for
For
people,
different women, yes.
because now they find that they won't get pregnant. They get more lax.
Yes.
And so with that freedom of believing you won't get pregnant, sex can be more enjoyable,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know.
So,
So
but now for women who experience hot flashes, I can say for me, when I was married,
yeah.
um, the last thing I wanted to do was be touched. I didn't, if my body is burning up, the last thing I wanted to do was feel a hot body next to mine. It just was uncomfortable. I mean, that's the best way to describe it. So during that time, it was the last thing. Now, maybe it had a lot to do with how I felt about my ex-husband. I don't know,
It
but
could be.
it, it was. I just did not like the feeling of that heat.
But it's just that you have the estrogen has decreased, but you can have
Yeah.
estrogen creams. You can do, there are different things people do to get that moisture there to make sex.
Yes.
Because if it's too dry, you can get sore,
Right. It's
or it can
uncomfortable.
become painful. So the doctors will introduce you to creams, moistures, and all kind of, and natural remedies too. You can use natural remedies. Flaxseed is a good one, I hear. You
Yes.
can, begin. Maybe I was doing all that stuff and didn't even realize.
That was helping. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's important when a woman is going through this, especially if you're married,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't feel like engaging in sex or intercourse. I think this is a honest conversation that you should have with your spouse. I
Yes.
mean, what do you think, Stephanie? Because I do think that some men believe their wives are no longer attracted to them or no longer in love with them, and they don't understand this woman is going through a lot
Yes.
emotionally.
The women go through a lot, and I hate to have to even refer to men too, but they do go through it too.
Yes,
Um, but for women, the women have the hot flashes, they have the mood swings, they have various different things. You have headaches, you don't want to talk, you have depressions, a lot of feelings, emotional feelings that women go through. The weight gain is one, as you said, the hair loss, lack of motivation,
yes,
um, just laziness, just nothing. Some women go through it to the extent that there is absolutely nothing they want to do, and
it's
they,
true.
they, they, they don't take any interest in their appearance anymore. They just lay back there, and and it's a terrible feeling when when somebody begins to not be interested in taking care of themselves, not eating, not going anywhere, not seeing any friends, being just depressed. It's terrible.
Well,
So,
do you think, I would say, especially for the women who aren't able to sleep, I
mhm,
think sometimes it's just simply being too tired. Just being too tired, you lose your motivation after a while because it's almost like a giving up. It's a subconscious thing, I believe. I mean, what do you
yeah,
think about that?
it could be subconscious.
Hmm.
Men may think it's subconscious, but it could be just that the women are going through this phase, and they just don't want to they can't sleep. It's an hormonal change. It's not something that people will notice all the time on the outside.
It's
It is
true.
something taking place internally. And
It's
because
true. It's
people
true.
can't see it from the outside, they may attribute it or relate it to something else that is not so. For example,
I agree. I agree.
I come home and I go to bed. I've worked all day. Maybe the woman doesn't even know I've worked all day, and I come home and in bed, my husband is ready to whatever. And
Hmm.
I just don't want to. I just feel like I don't want to.
You'd rather sleep.
I would rather sleep. So you could say the husband might say, okay, every time this is how it is, you just never want. But it could be that I am tired, or it could be that I'm experiencing this sort of menopausal, postmenopausal feelings.
Yes.
My estrogen is down, You know, a lot of things go through. So it is for the man and the woman, the husband and wife, to speak about some of these things.
I think that would make a difference because I think if the husband is more understanding, that
Hmm.
would take some pressure off the woman.
Would take a
You
lot of
know, I
pressure.
think it would take a lot of pressure off. And maybe if he says, "Is it okay if I just put my arm around you?" You
Yes.
know, and we can talk until we fall asleep. Just something as simple as that
Yes.
to show some understanding. I remember years ago watching the comedian Wanda Sykes, and she talked about when she was married, and she said she would hate when her husband would roll over wanting to have sex. And she
Hmm.
said she would look at her clock to see what time it was. And then she would do her little mental count to see how many hours of sleep she would have. And I remember being able to relate to that.
Yes.
It's like sleep. It's like when you have a baby, sleep takes on a whole new value.
Sleep is important.
Sleep is so important,
Sleep is important.
and it's like you go through that again when you're in this menopause stage, especially if you're going through insomnia, because to be honest with you, I think sleep will outweigh having sex because you're just beat down and tired. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew says, playing for a blessed episode. Thank you so much, Andrew. So I do think this is where couples have to have it may
To
be
talk.
a very unpleasant conversation, but it's like I think I could understand the man feeling left out and hurt. This is when affairs can slip into a marriage,
This is exactly, because you see the man, and the thing that makes that worse too is if you don't have a husband who is understanding,
Yes.
as you said. Because here I have worked, I come home and I'm working again, and there you want to disturb my sleep. Let's say
Right.
if you help me to wash the dishes or help me to cook, there has to be
Yes.
a little pre-place, something going on,
Yes.
so that I am not focused on my decreased estrogen
Yes.
and I am ready to work with you.
Yes,
But,
I think
you know,
there has to be some compromise there. So which is now we'll be talking about menopause in marriage. I
mhm,
think we do have to take into consideration how the man is feeling, the wanting to make love to his wife, and his wife has lost a desire. Not
mhm,
necessarily that she's fallen out of love, but she's just going through this phase, of menopause or perimenopause, whatever stage she's in.
yes,
But when you're not able to sleep and all that, after a while, you can become
worse.
very self-absorbed
Mhm,
because you're just thinking about yourself at this point because you're tired, you're worn out, you don't know what the heck is going on with your body. You may feel like, oh, I'm getting old, things like that are playing with your mind.
mhm.
So, what is your advice to married couples? Yeah, sit down and talk. But what else would you suggest for a married couple who are dealing with this issue of menopause?
A married the couple, apart from talking and trying to resolve something, the person, both people, if I have a husband, my husband, and he's telling me, oh, you're not this and you're not that, the first thing is that he just has to understand. We just have to talk about the issues, what I'm going through. And of course, we can't leave him out of it too, because what's happening is that he too is going through some changes in his body.
Yes,
As my body is changing, I might be getting fat, my stomach is getting a little bigger. So
yes,
is he. My hair is getting gray. So is his hair gray.
yes, yes,
And gray too, So the only way I could see to resolve this is that we talk about it, or we agree on what we can do. For example, are you going to take hormonal therapy? Are you going to do the estrogen treatment? Whatever it is that you need to do, we just have to talk about those sort of issues and
yes.
come to a compromise or come to an agreement.
I agree with that. I like that, Stephanie. And, I would like to suggest, taking some baby steps towards building up intimacy in the marriage again.
Mm-hmm.
Sit and hold hands, you know, on the sofa, watch a movie together, do a date night at home if you're too tired to go out. But I think this is a time where the man can work on going back to the early days when, you know, the in that in the lovebird stage, in the honeymoon phase, where
Yes.
the romance is there, you know, bring that back, you know,
Yes.
take that time to build up that trust again.
Absolutely.
Because when a woman starts to struggle with all of this, we know we now we'll be talking about low self-esteem.
Yes.
I remember feeling ugly. You know, I remember like seeing the change of my body, like the roundness of it, the curves not being there. You know, this roundness of this fat, and, you know, looking at my face, like you talked about aging, the gray hair, you know, missing the younger self. But it's like, as it says in the Bible, to everything there is a season. So I'm not going to look like I did in my 20s for the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
But it's like learning to embrace the stage of life where we are, and learning to, you know, we can still be attractive as we become older. You know, I think back to women of the past. I always thought, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but for some reason, the Christian women always seem like they belong to another decade. They dress so old, you know, for the time, you know. I just think back to all of that. And I remembered, like, wow, I just don't want to feel like an old woman. I just don't want to feel old. And I had that mental struggle. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Well, it's a thing. It's a association, and I
Yes,
think what has to do is people just have to reevaluate themselves
yes,
or reinvent themselves
yes.
around your personal goals and who you want to be. You know, what can you contribute? I don't think that looking old should be a part of growing old. I mean,
True, I agree.
because nature is going to take that.
Of
Nature
course.
is in control of that. Anyways, it doesn't matter what you do. You might look good on the outside, but you're still old on the inside. You know, so it's a time when you're going to look at yourself and reinvent yourself.
Yes,
Some people
yes,
might want to travel. Some people might look at you. You might not be involved in sexual activities as you should. So the shift is from, you know, sexual to relational. You get a
yes,
long talk about things that you can do. What all can you contribute here? To whose life can you make better? You know, make your friendships deeper. It to me, it's not. It's a time, as you said earlier, when many people may want to change relationships. It's not a time though. It should not be that time.
right.
It should at when you get to that age in your life, and your husband is at the stage too, whether he wants to agree or disagree, he's there too. But you will find that um, many people, as you gave that example earlier, some women want to look older, but some women want to look younger,
Yes,
because they have the time and they can reinvent themselves. Likewise for the men, I have to bring them in.
yes, I understand.
You know, for the men too, they are also looking to reinvent themselves. They want to go back to a place when you were looking young and beautiful. And it's the same thing with the women. I have to bring this back to them, to us,
That's true.
because I see women doing facelifts and women doing all kinds of things. They say, okay, we look old on the outside, but we don't feel old. So
Yes,
they do all this sort of stuff to themselves. And nothing is wrong with it.
to each his own.
To each his own.
Yeah.
So
Now,
at the time,
do you think when, I mean, both the man and the woman going through this phase of life, not feeling so great about themselves, I mean, we talked about communication earlier, but let's
mhm,
stress how important communication is during this stage, because I believe that. I'm not married anymore, but if I had a husband, I would like to believe I should be able to sit with my husband and say, "Look, I just don't feel beautiful anymore. I don't think you're attracted to me anymore. And I just don't feel comfortable, with the thought of having sex because I feel so unattractive. I feel hot and sweaty all the time.
Mhm.
I'm just not feeling good about myself." I think that should open the door for an honest, frank conversation where the man can say, "Hey, you know what? I don't feel so great about myself, too." Maybe
Yes.
use this as a time to build each other up instead of falling apart. What's your
Yes.
take on that?
Communication is key. Communication is key because there's no way I am going to understand what's happening to somebody unless we speak about it. The man might believe that I'm not interested in him while I am going through a lot of issues which he has not asked me how I'm doing today. He has not asked me what's happening, and he himself does not understand what I'm experiencing. So unless we can speak about it and we come to an understanding, it's a time to rekindle our communication, rekindle connection. We
Yes.
have to talk about this. A lot
Yes.
of things that happen, I think, during menopause, some of us, we don't even know what's happening. We don't know what's going on in our bodies.
It's
Unless
true.
unless somebody has already told us, or we have had friends who has given us some experience, some insight into the experiences that they have had. But the only thing we can do during that time is to talk, to rekindle relationship, maybe reinvent ourselves, as a man, as a woman. Okay, I'm going to go to the spa more often. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to eat. Let's change our diet, whatever. But it is so very important to talk.
I think it is because, and my next question is, what do we do when we no longer feel feminine? I remember when I was younger, there was nothing like, getting a new hairstyle or a new hair
Yes.
color and the makeup. I was a glamour girl back in the past. I just loved to do what I consider to be the girly things.
Mm-hmm.
And then going through this stage, I remember just feeling I didn't feel like that anymore. For a long time, I had that struggle, like to embrace myself again and my femininity and to feel like that. For lack of a better word, I'll use sexiness. I just
Yeah.
wanted to feel like that again. And I had a hard time embracing that. And then I started to do little things. It was like you talked about reinventing yourself, you know, trying to get some new clothes here and there, you
Mm-hmm.
know, not saying that you rely upon things like that to make you feel better, but sometimes a new outfit or something can uplift your spirits. You
Yes.
know, I went through a phase where because I really did miss wearing makeup, and I told you earlier, I couldn't wear makeup for a long time because I would sweat it off, I was so sweaty. That was a horrible feeling. But I remember gradually being able to wear makeup again, but I wouldn't put on
Mhm.
a whole lot, but
Yes.
just enough where I could feel good about myself. The lotions, the body sprays, perfume, and things like that. I did that for myself, buying new nightgowns that I felt that made me feel attractive.
Mhm.
It was the little things that I had to do these things to embrace my femininity once again. What's
Mhm.
your take on that?
Yes, it's as I said before, you reinvent yourself.
Yes.
You just have to, and you feeling like that, of course, is your body just changing. I think that because we're moving from this period, there's a period when you have to recognize that okay, we're no longer young people. We are getting up the hill and over. So at this time, we plan. How do we dress? How do we look? What is appropriate to us? What's appropriate to our age? How do you want others to see you? Things like that. And you
Yeah.
might want to go into maybe writing, or like we're doing our podcast,
Yeah.
or whatever you may do. We are literally reinventing ourselves, looking at ourselves as we change into this more mature person.
Now, what would you say for the woman that, because as I said earlier, this is a time when a lot of marriages do fall apart,
Mm-hmm,
unfortunately.
mm-hmm,
And they have disconnected, the couple they have disconnected because the man feels she doesn't want me sexually. So he goes and he seeks it elsewhere, and then the woman feels even worse about herself because there's nothing worse than knowing that your spouse is with someone else. Some women internalize that and they really they validate themselves through their partner. When they no longer have that, I mean, they feel even worse. So what is your advice to a woman who is going through that? Because look, there are some men, I'm not saying it's right because I do believe that couples should communicate, but some men, they will use it as justification to step out and to indulge in an affair. So what would you say to couples in this predicament?
I'm going to deviate one little bit to say that um, when we have a relationship, for example, people being married for so long, and
Yes,
one person suddenly realize that, okay, this is happening, and so I'm going to look elsewhere, and he ends up elsewhere in the end. There comes a time when that person regrets.
it's true.
They regret because what the grass looks like on that side, green and beautiful, is not going to remain green and beautiful. It's going to
Yeah.
become dry at some point. So the only thing here is for, and I say that and I reiterate, is that as we invent ourselves, we have to we have to think about who we want ourselves to be. It comes a time when you have to look at yourself more than sometimes you have to look at another person. What do you want? What do you want to see what do you want yourself to become? Are you going to be worried about what somebody else does, or are you going to be concerned about yourself? Focus on yourself, focus on your health, focus on where you want to be, what you want to do. And I think if you make the right moves in that end, that person will eventually come back. We don't want them to go and play around with somebody else. You know what I mean? Because if it doesn't catch that, you see, they're running from a woman who has gone through, who is going through a period of her life that is something that is irrevocable. But they, and say they go to a younger person, it comes a time when they are in that place and that younger
Yes.
person does not need them.
It's true. I mean, you know
Because
what? That is true. That is so true.
the marked difference in the woman and from the man is that we go through complete cessation of our period. Menopause stops completely. But as I had to look at from the man's perspective, I said, why do we have to go through this? What is happening to the men? The men go through a similar thing. They go through it too. Only that, the only thing is that their very active organ begin to look down, but it happens to them too. So it has to be a period when we both think deeply into what we want of ourselves.
Self
What do we expect of
evaluation.
ourselves?
We need to
Where
do
do we
that
want to
self
go?
evaluation.
A
Definitely.
total evaluation of
Yes.
our relationship. Do you want to leave? Do you want to start over again? What is this? Unless the relationship didn't start off good. Our
Yes,
children have grown up, and we have just been waiting for that to happen, to go our separate ways. But if it
yes.
lasts that long, why can't it last for the rest of your life?
I think lack of communication, sometimes
Communication.
pride,
Mhm.
frustration. I remember when I got to the stage where I knew I didn't want to be married anymore. But
Yes.
I remember I felt so bad about myself at that time. My self-esteem was very low at the
Mhm.
time. And I remember one of my church sisters asking me about my ex-husband. I told her we were no longer together, but I
Mhm.
will always thank her, Sister Naomi. She
Mhm.
said to me, "Whatever you do, Sister Bridget," she said, "do not let yourself go." She said,
Absolutely.
"If you go to the supermarket," she says, "wear your jeans and your high heels, put
Absolutely.
on your lipstick." She
Mhm.
said, "This is the time for you." She was basically telling me to find myself, to embrace dressing up and taking care of myself. I will forever love that woman for saying that
Mhm.
to me,
Mhm.
because what she did was she didn't allow it to sink into my brain that I should let myself go. I shouldn't care about how I look. Don't give into depression. And that's the best advice that anyone could have given to me. Yes, I was going through perimenopause at the time, but I
Mhm.
went through, like I said, I went through a rough time because of the hot flashes, insomnia, and everything else that
Yes.
came with it during that time. The brain fogginess, not feeling
Mhm.
sharp mentally. And I do believe a lot of marriages would survive this time if couples, like we said, communicated, but there was some reassurance on both sides.
Yes.
The man's feeling reassured, the woman's feeling reassured,
Yes.
and there's still, look, intimacy to me has to be a part of marriage. Intimacy does not have to be sex, but I do believe there has to be some level of, intimacy, that connection
Mhm.
that is just between that man and that woman. I think it's like life. It's like breathing in the marriage. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. It's not all sex. Can you imagine if you're married and your husband comes home and all he wants is to get into the bed with you and no talking?
Right.
You begin to feel like you're just piece of meat.
It's true.
Yeah, there's no value. Is it just you just want me for that?
It's
Can't
true.
we just sometimes go out? You
I believe in that way. It says you have to, I believe in it, like you have to make love to my mind before you can
Yes.
make love to me. That's how I look at it. And I think a lot of men would they would go much further than they realize if they took the time to make love to the woman's mind. Take that time to sit and talk to her. How was your day? What can I do for you? And I think it could be the same for the men too. I mean, we do have to show interest on
Yes.
both sides. Like
It's a
you, yeah,
two-way thing. It's a
it's a
two-way
two-way thing, definitely. No
It's a
one
two-way
wants to be
thing.
no one wants to be taken for granted. Hello, Sophia. Thank you so much for tuning in. Yes, no one wants to
Yes,
be
yeah.
taken for granted, but this is such a time of, would you agree? It's a time of vulnerability on both sides. The
Yeah.
man's feeling vulnerable, the woman's feel vulnerable, but they're too prideful to come together and share just how vulnerable they're feeling.
Yes. It is. Um, we just have to talk over that, and a vulnerability in the sense that we might feel neglected or dejected in several different ways, and unless we can talk about it, talk about our feelings, talk about our day. You know how important it is for somebody to make you feel like you're bigger than large,
Yeah.
especially in a relationship. How are you today, honey?
Yes.
What did you do? How
Yes.
was your day? How were the children? What's happening? You could speak a whole night for a week,
Yes.
every night for a week. And then I feel that if you can develop that kind of communication, that when you go to bed, you might not even feel tired because you
It's
keep talking.
true.
You're
It's true.
yes. You just have to keep that level of communication going on, and making each of you feel important and valued, and
Yes.
um, find things to do. Go out, go to the theater. Sometimes I
Yes.
just don't want to know that I have to come home and cook all the time. I think the man can cook. What would you like? Two of us working in the kitchen cooking,
Yeah.
or okay, I don't want to cook today. You know what used to bug me when I was married? I remember, and I set it straight immediately.
Yes.
My husband would come home and football is on the TV, and he's head straight to football, and then he's ready to eat. So he's watching football and I'm watching football too. So because two of us are watching football, there's not going to be any food, because
Yes.
this can't be happening all the time.
Yes.
I want to watch. I want to come home and sit down and watch TV sometimes. He got it
Yes.
quick. So the thing is that we have to, the menopause, this stage in our life as we grow older, as things begin to change, our bodies change, our everything about us change, our look on life has changed, our children have grown up. What do we have to do?
It's
No,
true.
we have to know each other more. We have to find things to do, go out on a cruise, hold hands, just let us
Yes.
not feel like we're that old, but we're still valuable. If
Yes.
you go to church. If you want to dress up, keep the values that you had when you met before you were married alive, even in your senior years. That's
Yes.
that's my thing.
Yes, no, I agree. I mean, go for a walk on the beach, do something. It doesn't take a whole lot. But
Mhm.
I think as we take the time to show that we value our partners, I think it can help us in the long run to feel value in ourselves. And
Mhm.
not because look, at the end of the day, we're all getting older. And getting older is it's just a part of life, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Of course you may miss, the days when you may not have as you get wrinkles and things like gray hair and all of that, but
Big
I think that
belly.
we learn to embrace it, because
Mhm.
I think every stage of life has its beauty as we learn to embrace it. There are things about myself now that I prefer about myself than when I was in my 20s, because
Mhm.
like wisdom, I will take wisdom over that younger body any day of the week. That's
Mhm.
just how I feel now. But
Yes.
I think it's a journey. Let's talk about seeking medical attention, because I do believe that sometimes it would be if we just went to the doctor, got some information. I mean, if the husband went to the doctor with his wife, maybe he could find out, he could hear it firsthand from the doctor what his
Yes.
wife is going through. Maybe that would give him a better understanding of what his wife is going through. What do you think about seeking medical attention?
That is important. Um, the doctors may want to um, give medication to help you go through certain periods of your life, or through pains, or whatever medicine they may want to give you. At this time of your life, you might find that people may they lose bone mass. Um, they are depressed, so going to the doctor for advice is good. um, I don't believe in taking too many medications. I
Do
really
your research on the medications, because
do
you
your
mentioned
research.
earlier about cancer, things of that
Yes.
nature. I'd like to welcome Irene. Irene, thank you for tuning in. I've really missed you, Irene. I really have. I'd like to
Mhm. Hello,
welcome my friend
Irene.
Joan. Thank you so much for tuning in, Dr. Randall. And
Ah,
Sophia has an LOL comment with the comment that you made about, watching TV, watching football with your husband.
oh,
You
yeah.
know, so yeah, I do think it's important. I do think there are some natural remedies out there for menopause,
Yes.
but I think knowledge is power. And I
Knowledge is
think if
power.
we seek that knowledge and then find out, we can play around with different things until we find the right fit for ourselves. Let's
Yes.
talk about lifestyle changes because I think that can make a great difference in this process. So we
Hmm.
can talk about changes in nutrition,
Hmm.
being more active, learning to relax. That was an area where I struggled, and sleep, because sleep is something that many of us struggle with during that phase. So, how
Hmm.
important is lifestyle change?
Lifestyle changes go along with I'm going to put both together with your age and the value you put on yourself and your time and what you see, what you want yourself to be. We don't want to become that kind of old lady sitting down rocking chair every day, and bringing on memory loss and all that. So we want to get ourselves involved. We might want to go to church or whatever group activity you want to be involved in. We have more
Yeah.
time. We
Yes.
have more time on our hands. So get yourself involved in some kind of activity. Find out what your community, in my case, I'll say community, what they have involved. They have some old people group around, I know. We go join the groups or activities you might find yourself wanting to be more involved in politics, going to Toastmasters Club, do a lot of things. Go walk by the lake. I have a lake, so I'm saying lake. Go to the
Yes.
movies sometimes. Get yourself, go on a cruise here and there, travel. Now our lifespan is getting a little bit more narrow,
It's
so
true.
we have time. So we make some changes based on the times that we have and the gifts that God has given us. What you
Yes.
can do. You might want to go. I don't know if people are still embroidering.
That's something I was never very good at.
That's a thing of the past. Learn some new skill. Go, what is big now? AI is giant size big. Learn some new skills. Don't give up on life because
That is true.
until God says it's over, it's not over.
And that's true. Joan is saying keep learning and using the brain,
Yes,
journal, write, and serve. And that
yes.
is, I definitely agree with that, Joan.
Write a book. Write a book.
Yes, write a
You know,
book. I mean, yeah, and that's
and just
Joan's thing. In fact, Joan will be my guest next week, and we'll be talking about the importance of sharing your story.
yes.
And I saw Joan had a comment, I love to sleep. It is hard when you love to sleep and you have insomnia. And I think that's where a lot of women struggle during menopause. That's
Yes.
when I think seeking medical attention is important. I'm not saying start taking sleeping pills. But there are things that we can do that I think can help us to get back in our regular sleep patterns because
Mhm.
there's nothing worse than being tired and not being able to sleep.
I think, as I said, I think before, do some exercise. Get some exercise. And the doctor has medications too, but do you want to be on a medication? Do you want to be
Right.
medicated? Find out natural medicines, herbal medicines, because they have a lot of herbal medicines that can help, um,
Yes.
that you can take. Natural thing that God created. God knew our bodies before we knew before we knew
It's
ourselves,
true.
and He created all these medications
It's true.
for us.
There's definitely help for each symptom during this process. Let's
Mhm.
talk about support and the importance of having an inner circle and even seeing a therapist if that is what it comes to. I think it's important to be able to talk about what we're feeling, not sweeping it under the rug, not second guessing what our bodies are going through. I think there's something about articulating our feelings that really help us when it comes to healing. What's your take on that?
um yes, we just have to focus on that, what we want to do, our bodies. We just have to focus on those things, and realize that we are important. Our bodies are important to us, and we're going to treat the bodies as we want. We want. We would like others to treat us. You know what? The point is that nobody is going to take care of you more than you can take care of yourself.
Amen. Amen.
Nobody,
That is
no,
true.
nobody has any interest in you more than you will have in yourself. And I realized this a long time ago, and it has nothing to even do with menopause. When my late husband passed away, I have to always bring this up. I realized, I said, "Oh my God, this world just keeps turning. The
Yes.
children keep going on. I keep living my life." And it's the same thing. If you drop dead today, they remember you until you are buried. And once they you
Yes. No,
and once
it's true.
yeah, and once you they leave the cemetery, you are left behind. Life continues. That's how God continues.
Life goes on. When my son died, I had that same feeling, and it's
Mhm.
like, you know what, the world is still going on. People are living their lives, and I had to be intentional about trying to move forward. Annie Bridget says also volunteering is a great way to be involved when we serve others, to add to the previous conversation. And I do agree, and like doing this podcast is like therapy for me. It's like that desire to serve others. Welcome, Joyce. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Sophia says, talking about it is therapeutic. I believe it is very therapeutic. When
Yeah.
I started to talk about it and realize that other people were going through it, it wasn't such a lonely journey, and it wasn't so. I didn't feel as afraid as I did in the beginning, because I mentioned earlier, I thought I was having going through the early stages of dementia. I
Mhm.
did not want to admit that to myself. I can't even begin to tell you how terrifying that was. So I do believe knowledge is power, and as older women, and I'm not calling myself an old woman, I said as older women,
Older.
I think it is our duty to educate the younger women. If there's a younger woman that's starting to go through the struggle, encourage her. Let her know that you went through the struggle too. I think that we as women, we have to embrace each other and lift each other up during this process.
Yes. We just have to normalize the whole process,
Yes.
you know. And as we have we are experiencing this whole thing about menopause, as somebody said, just write books, do our podcast,
Yeah.
social medias, support groups, do all these things to make it people realize that it's not taboo. It's not something that we should push under the rug. And I think what's happening is that because we have not really spoken about it as being, or we have not normalized it, that's why a
Yes.
lot of people can take their old parents and push them into nursing homes and park them as if they're nobodies
It's
anymore,
true.
because it old age is looked at on as something, as a you're
It's
no
like a
longer
curse. It's
important,
like a curse, and
like
you're
a
no longer
curse,
you're no longer of value,
you
which I
know.
think is such a shame. Let's talk about this before we close, Stephanie. How
Mhm.
important is it for men to be a part of this dialogue?
uh, it's very important that men be a part of it. It is so important because what happened is that technically men think they don't go through, well, they don't go through menopause, but they experience something very similar. And uh, and um, and I guess at some other podcast you may want to
Yeah, I
talk
told
about
you
that.
I would love to talk about that in a future podcast. I would definitely like to address that. But
Yeah,
the
but
word menopause should not be a taboo word.
it's
I
not a
think we should
taboo.
freely be able to talk about it, talk about what we're going through, the discomfort. the misery of it, because it is a miserable
It
process.
is. And I wanted to continue to say that, us, just as we go through our period, or or miserable period, or mood swings, and all of that, we as women, we can recognize that the men go through something similar too,
Yes,
because they have mood
yes,
swings, they're irritable,
yes,
they argue, they they have muscle loss, they have hair gray, they start
yes.
dressing like they're young boys, and all these things, they're going through some process too. So
Yes,
while some of us women, as we get older, we begin to dress like we're young too, you check
yeah,
the men, they dress that way, some of them, and they want to buy the fastest cars and
it's
the
true.
young
That
looking things,
midlife crisis.
dye their hair, and they, you know, I, all that sort of stuff. So it is good for both, for the couples to talk about it, because then we can find that there are similarities in the way that we both um, have for in our relationships, or the
Yes,
changes that are taking place in our bodies.
yes,
Some women may say, My husband is too miserable." The men say, "My wife is too miserable." So who is too miserable unless you begin to talk about it?
yes. Sit down and talk to each
Sit
other
and
about it.
talk.
I think communication is key in this situation. I think it can be very helpful. And, you know, to the women out there, I would say, look, it's like we have to learn to embrace the process, but
Mhm.
learn about it as we go along. So the journey is not so intimidating, because knowledge is power. We have a better idea of what's going on in our bodies. But I
Yeah,
do believe that we should learn to embrace aging gracefully.
yeah.
If you choose to do the facelift, the cosmetic surgeries, whatever, that's up to you, to each his own. But I do believe that we need to let go of being afraid to age. It's just a part of life. It's our season. We're not going to be 20 forever. I find there are things about being 61. There are things about that age that I'm embracing. I'm not going to say to you I don't miss certain aspects of my life when I was younger, but aging can be a wonderful adventure. It's what we choose to make of it.
The thing is that many people don't get to that stage, so we should all be very happy if we
It's
get to
true.
a certain stage in our lives.
It's so true,
It's
Stephanie.
it's
What
a
are your
blessing.
closing thoughts?
Well, I said my clothing thought, I would say, whether we are young or we are old, this aging is just a part of life. And our bodies will change, but our value won't change,
It
or
never
shouldn't
diminish.
change.
It doesn't
Our,
diminish,
it
right?
shouldn't change. And so God still has a purpose for every season of our life. And we don't have to chase our youth.
Exactly. Oh,
We
I
just
love
need to
that. I
walk.
love that.
We just have to walk in wisdom.
Amen.
Yeah.
I love how you said that we don't have to chase our youth. I think it's just how we choose to see this process and not being ashamed of it,
Yeah.
and encouraging each other through the process.
Yes.
Stephanie, thank you so much for agreeing to do this topic. It's always a pleasure having you on. And
Thank you.
please tell the viewers about your channel and about your show.
Thank you, Bree, for this opportunity too. I really enjoyed being on your show.
And tell the viewers
Everybody,
about your
we are coming from a long place. Bree and I don't think Bree knew me, but way back then, when Bree was just leaving high school, I was beginning to be one of the teachers at Titchfield with Cheryl and Rosie Anderson. Those are my so, and a few other teachers. I don't remember them now, but yes, I have a podcast, a channel called CHRY TV. Christ has redeemed you, and yes, it's part of my menopausal plan. I've established it because I wanted something to do. It's a long story. I'm just saying, giving this part of it. I wanted something to do to keep me busy. And so I have my CHRY TV. And I do something quite similar to Bree. I will interview people and give my own opinion on some topics too. I'm not a professional in anything, but yeah, thank you.
No, and you know what? I love what you're doing, Stephanie. And I tell you, it's just amazing that my Titchfield family, I'm so proud of that I had the blessing and the opportunity to attend Titchfield High School. And I remember meeting you through Facebook. And it's
Yes,
like you're just a part of the Titchfield family and a part of
yes,
that. It's just amazing at the age of 61. I started attending Titchfield at the age of 13. I just turned 13.
yes,
And to see that Titchfield is still such a big part of my life. I mean,
yeah,
most of my guests have a Titchfield association. It's amazing.
yes. I was just you didn't know me, as I said. I was coming in I came there 84.
I left in 81.
Oh, you
I
left in
graduated in
81.
81, yeah. But
Yeah,
Cheryl was my accounting teacher and
yeah.
brilliant, brilliant, brilliant lady. And Sophia is saying she's wishing you all the best.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you.
Yeah, this
I
was,
wish
I
I
mean,
wish I wish I could know all the students. I had some great students there, but what I know is that I I remember this. I don't remember the names, and as a student myself, I remember seeing a teacher who had taught me, and I went up to her, and she couldn't remember me, and I felt so hurt.
yes.
And then when it came to my time, when my students come and say, "Oh, Mrs. Lopez," and I don't remember them, I said, "Oh, I understand. I
Wow.
understand."
It
Yeah.
is, it's a blessing. Like I've run into teachers, they remember me. I've always feel very happy about that.
Mhm.
It's such a blessing, but the impact that teachers make in our lives, and the funny thing is when I realize, like, I have a hard time calling Cheryl Cheryl. She says, call me Cheryl. I'm still calling her Miss Becky. But it's like, and I'm like, it's just the respect thing. But
She's still
knowing
my
that she's not much older than I am. That's the crazy thing.
yes. She's still my friend.
She's
We
a
talk.
lovely person.
She's somewhere there, over there.
Yes, yeah.
I
From
know
time to time, we
we talk.
definitely reach out to each other.
Yeah.
She's a wonderful lady. But I would just like to thank everyone that tuned in tonight. If you watch the replay and you have a question or comment, please feel free to post it. And please join me in Dr. Joan Randall next week. We'll be talking about the importance of sharing your story. Stephanie,
Yeah.
once again, thank you so much. How many times have you been on? I've lost count, but I said I
I have not
appreciate having
I
you
have
as
never counted.
a
I never count.
thank
But
you, thank you so much.
we're gonna be having you. I'm gonna have you on mine to talk about that very topic.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'd like to wish everyone a blessed week. And once again, thank you so much for tuning in and good
You're
night.
welcome. Good night. Good night, everyone.